In the last section, we started putting together a tree data structure with the end goal of figuring out some way to iterate through the entire tree using a for-of loop. Since we're building a class to represent a comment here, we need to consider how we're going to set up that symbol.iterator this time around. So in the last example we had done, we said that we would place the symbol.iterator key on an object, and then that would point at a generator function. This time around, we're working with a class, and so the syntax is going to look just a little bit different. Let's put the syntax up, and then we'll talk about exactly what's going on. I'm going to put star, square braces, symbol.iterator, parens, and then close it all off. So yeah, this one is a little bit ugly. First, we lead with a star, and that indicates that, hey, we're about to write a generator here. Then we use our square brackets to place our symbol.iterator key, and then we place our parens. So this is really used going back to the improved object literal syntax, which is how we write methods inside of a class. So I know this syntax here looks a little bit nasty. This is kind of one of those things where you're just going to kind of memorize it a little bit and remember the syntax. So now inside of this generator, we need to yield some values so that the for-of loop has something to actually iterate over. So this is really the part where stuff gets pretty challenging. Let's look at our tree diagram to try to figure this part out. So here's our tree diagram. So when we want to iterate over all the values of our tree, we might take an approach like this. We might start with the top node, or like kind of the current node, and we can just straight yield this node's content value. So like this dot content. So like getting the value of the current node is not that bad. But then we want to yield the value of each of our child nodes as well. So this is the hard part. We want to yield the value of each of our child nodes, which in turn are going to have their own children as well. So remember when we used that yield star syntax previously? We said that when we have a generator or our for-of loop comes across yield star, it kind of means that the loop will fall through to the next generator. So that's going to be the same approach we're going to take here. We can yield the current node, so like yield this dot content, then go to our first child and yield star the first child, and then we can yield star the next child and yield star the next child, and so on and so on. So let's see what this might look like in actual practice. And by the way, I know that this this area of this tutorial is getting a little bit esoteric. This is all stuff that I don't really expect you to kind of memorize and understand the first time through. This is absolutely something that you got to just kind of play around with just a little bit on your own to kind of get a better or a solid grasp of how symbol.iterator and generators and yield and all that stuff kind of works out. So keep that in mind, but let's keep moving on. So the first thing that we'll do is yield the current value, or the value of our current node, our current comment. So we'll yield this dot content. Next, we'll need to yield the each child of this dot children. So when I say kind of do something to each child, you might be thinking of like map or for each. And I applaud you if that's what you think of, but I'm going to throw one tiny little oh man, this is a total gotcha. Okay, this is a total gotcha. I'm going to tell you this right now. Hopefully you will remember this in years to come or weeks or whatever it is. Array helpers like map and for each do not work with generators. So we cannot yield from inside of an array helper or a callback of any sort. And that just comes down to the way that generators are implemented in JavaScript. So whenever we want to iterate over some collection and then yield every single value in that, we have to use the for-of loop again. So we'll say for let child of this dot children, I want my for of loop to go into every child and find all the different yield values inside of that child. So we can yield star on child. Okay, so for every node of this dot children, go into that child, see if it is iterable, and if it is, just go ahead and iterate through it. So now I'm going to go down to the very bottom here. I don't really need to print out the tree anymore, so I'm going to take that off. And we're going to create now a for of loop to iterate over our tree variable here. And for every node inside that tree, I want to just collect all the values. So we're going to kind of aggregate all those values into a single array. So we'll say const values is an empty array. Then for let value of tree, values.push value. And then let's check out values. And we've got our list of all of our different comments in here. And so you can imagine that if you were trying to find like a very particular comment, or kind of find all the different authors or all the different text or all the different upvotes and sum them all up or anything like that, anything having to do with our entire tree structure, using symbol.iterator would be a fantastic approach because it allows us to write code that's just very concise and straightforward. It just looks like a for of loop. It looks like we're just iterating over an array of data, but in fact, we've got a rather complicated data structure here that we're iterating over. Whew, okay, so this is pretty much it for generators and symbol.iterator and all that kind of crazy stuff. So I hope that this has been at least somewhat reasonable in content. And again, this is really a topic where I'm hoping that you'll kind of experiment around a little bit with iterators and generators and realize that, yeah, it does take, just a little bit of struggle, but once you figure it out, it ends up being not the worst thing in the world. So I encourage you to take a little bit of time to play around with generators.